Good morning, everybody. First of all, I have to excuse, although I was living in Poland for quite some years, I rather reside to my English to give the presentation. Otherwise, I don't know if I would be able to bring across what I want to bring across. When we prepared for the conference, we thought it might be good to provide a bit of a sanity check to the opportunity in Poland. While we're all excited about what's happening here and the growth opportunities that are there, there's obviously a world outside here where Poland and the offshoring and outsourcing opportunity fits in and has opportunities but also challenges to deal with. And what I would like to talk about briefly is these opportunities and challenges and how a center or a provider can position himself in this network, so to say, in this global network, to become successful. To start with, I would like to come back to some of the numbers that we already heard this morning presented, and that I would like to start with to embed a bit the opportunity and the challenges in. I just get this up very quickly. This is the chart that I presented in April on the McKinsey EastCom conference, where every year we track a bit what's happening across Eastern Europe in terms of outsourcing and offshoring and the growth here. And everybody knows in 2009 there was a crisis and offshoring went down a bit, and everybody was expecting more in 2010. But actually it came back quite nicely. We're not back yet to normal terms, at least for 2010 overall in Eastern Europe, but we're coming back to very nice growth rates that actually are reflected also in the presentation this morning. And I think the growth opportunities are better for Poland than it actually is for the rest of Europe. And we'll come to the reasons for that in a moment. Poland is the offshoring leader in Eastern Europe. It even surpassed Russia, which was actually not on the map this morning, but is in terms of a lot of services in R&D and IT actually a pretty big hub. But Poland has overcome that. The second statement that should be made at the moment is actually most of the growth comes from business process outsourcing. It doesn't come from IT, it doesn't come from R&D, but it's really business process outsourcing and offshoring that drives the growth of the shared services in Eastern Europe. And you see that the market is becoming more mature. So outsourcing providers play a bigger role in Poland and in the Eastern European market overall than they used to play some years ago. Yeah? That is actually a sign for us who are watching the market globally for quite a while that Eastern Europe is becoming a very mature offshoring market by now. It's not something that is Wild West anymore where everybody's racing for the best location, but it's a very well-established and well-managed market by now. And you see that also in the situation that in the last year there weren't many new companies coming to Eastern Europe. Most of the growth that we have seen is actually coming from existing centers and from existing providers. I think personally there is an opportunity here, and the opportunity to re-engage in interesting companies into Eastern Europe who not yet came here. Yeah? It's not only about harvesting the companies who are already there and providing them the opportunity to grow, but attracting new companies to come to Poland, to come to Eastern Europe, is actually a big opportunity. And then finally, and most importantly, because I think it's most relevant for Poland, skill is becoming more important than cost in the overall discussion. In the first years, it was all about labor arbitrage. Yeah, how much can we save? By now, even on a global scale, the access to talent pools is more relevant than the very specific cost differential. Yeah? And I think that actually works in favor of Poland. I'll come back to that in a second. Now here, a bit of the detail, a slightly different map than you've seen this morning in terms of scope. You see the comparison last year versus this year, and you see that on the vertical axis, you see the total FTEs. This is the number you heard this morning, about 70,000 in Poland. On the horizontal axis, you see the change, so basically the dynamics of this. And what you're seeing is that across Central and Eastern Europe, all the countries are actually growing quite nicely in the last year, with Poland really in the lead here. that in Russia and in Ukraine, nothing much is happening at the very moment. Yeah? For a lot of reasons, but that's an opportunity for Eastern Europe, for Central and Eastern Europe, that you may capture. And something that is not even on the chart that works in your favor right now is actually the political insecurities on the Northern African coast. Yeah? There are actually some formidable competitors of Eastern Europe have actually risen there, especially in the forms of Morocco and Egypt. And they might eventually come back. But right now, for all the political instability that we all know about, there's a big opportunity to position Eastern Europe even better on the map than you could under, so to say, normal instances, yeah, and normal circumstances. This I don't want to stay on long, but I think it just epitomizes on some examples why Poland is so well positioned. And the well positioning is actually the richness of the portfolio and the variety of locations and the potential for growth. I don't think that any other country in Eastern Europe has that. A lot of the countries are focused either on specific businesses or on specific cities. I think in Poland you have and you can sustain and you can grow the whole portfolio, which I think is different and a real competitive advantage for Poland compared to a lot of other countries in the region. But nevertheless, let's put things in perspective for a second. Here are a lot of numbers on that chart. I will give you a bit of an idea what that chart is about. It's obviously a comparison to India. So dark blue is Eastern Europe, light blue is India in terms of growth rates. When you look at the absolute numbers which are depicted on the left side of that chart, you obviously see that in terms of total number of people, India is still 7 to 8 times bigger than the whole of Eastern Europe. So let's not kid ourselves, we need to put things a bit in perspective. However, what you clearly see on that chart is that things are changing. From everybody runs to India, people are thinking more about global networks here. Because over the years, actually, especially in the BPO arena, Eastern Europe is growing quicker than India. There's more growth in the business from a percentage perspective, obviously starting from a lower base, but overall there's a bigger growth in Eastern Europe. And over time, from 2005, you actually gained market share in the global offshoring market. Yeah? So, and that depicts a bit that this type of global network plays a much bigger role than the absolute cost differential, which was always India. Yeah, they are the lowest cost, we go there. Right now, that's not the discussion anymore. It's really about the global network. I think the challenge that is out there that we see at the moment a bit is it's very much driven by business process outsourcing for reasons that are very obvious. It's language, it's cultural proximity, yeah, that make Eastern Europe so attractive for BPO. The question is a bit sustaining this growth in BPO, and can we attract more on the IT side and also on the R&D side? Because it's quite obvious that Eastern Europe is also good and actually quite famous in all the engineering disciplines. So there's no good reason that on the higher value-adding functions within IT or in R&D, there's a good chance to grow centers here in Eastern Europe as well, or grow them even further than they are grown today. Now, here is a survey that we do every year for our conference for depicting a bit the reasons that people are giving for setting up centers in Eastern Europe. And what you see here in comparison of last year or against last year, there's a real shift of the tide. And that just goes to support what I said earlier. People are looking for language skills, cultural proximity, and access to talent pools rather than pure cost advantage. The cost advantage comes to a certain extent as a given, so you need to have it, but it will not differentiate you as a country, as a city, in the overall game. That's a very important chart, and actually a chart that depicts the research where we invest a lot in. And that's the question about, okay, what is the talent pool? And is the talent pool still big enough in order to support the demand growth, or the demand is there? We've highlighted a bit here the Eastern European talent pools against the rest. And what it tells you is on the left side, the overall number of graduates that come from any universities or upper education schools in the respective country, while on the right side you see the suitable graduates, which is the pool every shared services is tapping in. It's obviously only a fraction of the overall graduate pool because you would expect business skills or language skills, mobility and all these type of things. I think the most important statement here is that Poland, A, has the second biggest overall suitable graduates pool, and also that the kind of demand supply match, so how many of those people actually go into shared services, yeah, is actually still very good. It's only 15%. That means there's a lot of growth opportunity on the demand side because the supply is there. If you look for Hungary in last year, and obviously that's only for the last year, in absolute terms, if you would kind of, obviously it's always a mixed bag, but if you would just calculate the numbers of new entrants into a shared service versus the number of graduates that came out of the universities, the industry was sucking in a lot of people out of the university system into shared services, into offshoring opportunities. There's no growth potential in Hungary anymore, from my perspective. Yeah. So I think, and that actually works absolutely in favor of Poland. The vast number of people who could enter the system, could go to the two shared services, is at least double the quality of what you have in any other Eastern European country. Yeah? And you should build on that. You should talk to the government about what can we do about making this even more bigger on the suitable graduate side. What can we do with, how can we interact with the cities to attract the suitable graduates to the shared services? This is your biggest advantage as a country. And you should build on that. Now, this was a bit kind of, okay, why do I think the growth opportunity is there and why Poland is well positioned, even on a global scale, to capture that growth opportunity? Now the question is, how do you need to position yourself? What is the right setup of such a center in order to sustain this value proposition that is obviously there on a global scale? This just depicts where we are. And that all works, as it stands here, works in favor of Poland. There's a lot of volatility out there in terms of politics, in terms of economics, even in terms of natural disasters, yeah, where we feel actually Eastern Europe is a rather safe place, and Poland specifically. And you need to maintain that position, and you need to, how should I say, market that position, because it's a differentiator in these days. Yeah? It's a real differentiator in these days. The question is now, how do you position a center in this game? And there are 4 pervasive trends, and I come to that in a second, that are there over the years and will stay over the years. One is there will be global O&O factories. So really high-scale transactional centers where all kind of lower-cost work will be done, and the whole thing builds on scales. There will be multi-shoring. I said it's a global network. It's not about one location. It's about managing the footprint of a company on a global scale. There will be multi-sourcing. It's not about big deals, but there are a lot of niches out there which you can get in. So a lot of opportunities that are very specific, and I'll come to some of them in a second. And then there is multi-servicing. That means that within a company, actually people will create smaller slivers of services. It's not about the big IT outsourcing deal anymore, yeah, where everything goes to one provider, but it's about 15 or 20 partners who provide specific services to the company. So these are the kind of the big trends that have been there for the last 10 years and will continue to be there. Now, what does it mean? I here on that chart basically put these big trends against, so to say, models of shared service centers that we see. In quintessential, we don't believe that the value proposition for Eastern Europe or for Poland specifically should lie with big global large-scale factory centers for commodity services. Because eventually, even if they are there today, they will move away. They will not stay here. Yeah? So there is an opportunity, and that's the first what we call winning model, in being a regional center, especially in services that are language dependent, that are depending on culture, that reflect IP for a company that needs to be kind of secured, so where the legal environment is important. That's winning model 1, and I'll come to that in a second. Winning model 2, which I think especially for Poland will become increasingly important, or is already increasingly important, is actually center of competence. We believe that, or it's a typical trajectory that centers start off as pure transaction centers, but build so much knowledge about the process, about the content of the respective transaction, that they suddenly become the center of competence for finance, for HR, for R&D, for a whole organization. And that happens typically over 3 to 5 year horizons from setting up the center to kind of being in that position. And it's a very maintainable position. It's something where India probably will never get you, especially when it is related to language skills. Yeah, I can't envision a competence center for a German country on engine design in India in terms of real design competence. They can do the CAD/CAM drawings, but they will never design it from here, at least not in the foreseeable future. Yeah? So there's a real sustainable value proposition out there which focuses more on competence than it focuses on transaction. And then finally, I need to stay with 2 sentences here. I think there was no, up to now, real local outsourcing provider market for offshoring. It's all the big guys that are out there, the Capgeminis, the IBM, the HPs, that are anyhow global players, but there were very little local players, so companies that have been founded here, have been grown here to serve offshoring needs. We think that's an opportunity where companies are start tapping in. So it's an opportunity also for local companies to think about what are the specific niches that we are exceptional in and that we could market also in Western Europe. And what is the value proposition we bring to that? The last 3 for me are the winning models. And I would like to spend a bit more time, 5 minutes or so, to explain a bit these winning models. The first one is the regional scale center. It's actually a lot of companies basically say we need to hedge our global risks and we need to be in many locations to be able to move stuff. And we need to host stuff that is region specific, may it be for language, may it be for culture perspective, in the region. It still needs to scale up, but it will never scale up to a global center like it would be in India. Yeah, so if people build these regional centers, they are thinking, 1,000 people, compared to, I don't know, a center in India which has 10,000 people. So it's rather mid-sized, but it's part of a global system where companies are able to move transactions and move work basically back and forth between the centers as the market develops. A recent example was from a client of mine, Lufthansa, who have a finance center actually in Thailand, in Bangkok, and when the political unrest came along, they basically shifted 50% of the work to Krakow, where they have another center. And the other 50% went actually to Mexico City, where they have a center. So by that, they basically manage on a global scale what they are doing. Yeah? And that's where these regional centers will play a vital part, yeah? And where you can actually have a sustainable value proposition, because companies will be in the region. Yeah? They will not move out of the region with that. It becomes more specific. It becomes more specific when it comes to the competence center. This is all about strengthening a unique value proposition of the center. Why are we different as a center, and why are we better equipped to serve the company or the market, depending on who you are, than the rest of the organization? So this is what these centers need to focus about. Yeah? And that's kind of where the whole discussion about creating or accessing the talent pools on the high end, getting the really good people out of the talent pool, and developing the people in the center as part of the global network. So not only have them sit in some center, but really send them out to the world to collaborate with other centers, I think is most important. Yeah? To give you an example from our space, we have our knowledge center, as we call it, in India. So we have a whole set, 200, 300 knowledge experts on various industries or functions that are sitting in India, which basically not only sit in that center, but really go out to the world and help our various engagements across the globe. But the knowledge, so to say, center of gravity is there in that specific center in India. And then finally, smart outsourcing. This is not about what you all know and what everybody does, namely IT outsourcing, transaction outsourcing, so the big centers, but it's really about very specific services. To give you an idea, what is these days happening a lot is the whole discussion about big data. So what do we do with the big data volumes we have as a global organization, and what kind of information and insight do we get out of that? There are a lot of specific R&D companies and analytics companies right now set up, not only in Eastern Europe, but all over the world, who say, okay, we have the knowledge, we have the analytic capabilities to go into that stuff and find out what the valuable knowledge nuggets for you. And that's a very, very much growing business around the globe. And there's no reason why these kind of businesses should be set up in Eastern Europe as well. Yeah, because you have the talent. Yeah, you have the people who can do this, and you can provide them to the global market at a reasonable cost. So it's a great value proposition to have. So these are what I would call the 3 winning models. And the question is for each of you or for everybody who has a center, which game do we want to play? And how long can we play it in the global network that we are in? And what do we need to do in order to sustain this value proposition?